Hello everyone, and for today's guide video, we're going to talk about Parthia, or Pahlava in Europa Barbarorum 2. So let's get started. So I guess the important thing to know at the start here is that Parthia technically was not independent at the start date. So there was a satrapy called Parthia that was controlled by a vassal of the Seleucids. And I think a few years after the start date, in any case, they did declare independence. But then they were kind of overrun by the Parni, a tribe called the Parni. And the Parni ended up leading the Parthians to victory and creating the Parthian Empire. So you start out essentially as the nomadic Parni, as the Daha nomadic confederacy here. And so you start out with just one camp. You start out with Nisa. So similar to the Sakarauka, you start out with just a camp. And camps are good in terms of like recruiting nomadic units like horse archers, cavalry units, things like that. But they're not necessarily very good economically, and they're not necessarily very good in terms of encouraging population growth. You don't want to keep them around if you want to do faction reforms generally. But in any case, Parthia, you start out with just Nisa, your camp. And it will be possible to upgrade Nisa into a settled town, but I'll explain that in a bit. So actually, as Parthia, your economy is not super bad at the beginning, so it's negative 1,900, which is not so bad. All things considered. I mean, you just have one camp, right? And you actually have a pretty big horde army here, right? So you also have Arshak, and he essentially represents the founder of the dynasty, the Arsacid dynasty. He was able to take control of Parthia and really lead it successfully against the Seleucids for a time. But in any case, he's very young at the start, and your leader at the beginning is Phrapates here. And you'll notice that your guys, they want to settle at the beginning. So Parthia, you're kind of at the tail end of your nomadic lifestyle here. But in any case, at the beginning, you don't start out at war with the Seleucids. And actually, I would say you don't really want to go to war with them right at the start because there's a couple of towns right above you. So there's Khwarezm up here, and there's also Bukharak, which is right up here in the Massagetay region. And these are both settlements. So these are important towns, and they're towns you'll probably want to take before moving south. So actually, you could even just take Bukharak, and that would make you more stable economically and allow you to go down. But if you take Bukharak and Khwarezm, that'll be even better. Yeah, here it is. So again, these are both large towns, fairly well defended. So again, like I said, if you take Bukharak, your economy will be much better, and you'll be freed up to kind of do whatever you want after that. And let's talk about the Parthian army. So in your first army, you have some Dahe riders, the Dahe horse archers. And the Daha horse archers are really good. So they have 7 missile attack, high missile attack, and their melee is actually pretty good. for horse archers. So better than the Saka horse archers, better than the Armenian horse archers, better than the Armenian horse archers in missile attack and melee, better than the Saka horse archers in melee. So these guys are very good to have at the start. You also have Parthian horse archers, which, for the sake of comparison, they are, I believe, about the same as the Saka horse archers in terms of melee, and their missile attack is pretty high for horse archers. So it's the same as the better horse archers here. But their melee is a lot worse. Additionally, you also start out with Dahe mounted skirmishers, so the javelin cavalry. And I don't know why everyone gets down on javelin cavalry. These guys are pretty good, and they're a little bit and they're better in melee than your horse archers. So you'll be able to skirmish with them. You do have to do a little bit of micromanagement to make sure they don't get caught up in the melee. But these guys, they can hold their own in melee. They're better in pretty much every respect in melee. And the only thing is their range is short with their javelins. But they're not so bad. I like them. And you also get this unit of nasty cataphracts. Very good Parthian cataphracts. Extremely high charge. They're better than the Armenian general's bodyguard. And I believe a little better than the Armenian cataphracts as well. They're pretty comparable to the Saka cataphracts. But your best unit, definitely, or one of your best units, is your general's bodyguard. So your general's bodyguard, not quite as good in melee as the heavy cataphracts, but your defense is the same, really good. Your charge is just okay, but you're also horse archers. So these guys are like, I would say they're fairly comparable to the Saka horse archer bodyguard, but the Saka have less armor and less total defense. The Saka have a little more attack. So these guys, they're better in terms of defense, not so much in terms of attack, but they're very good. I like them a lot, and they look great too. But in any case, the other thing about the Khwarezmians I forgot to mention is that there's a big rebel army there as well. So that's why I recommend, this was a kingdom at this time, kind of a sort of Hellenized Iranian sort of kingdom in Khwarezm that we know very little about, actually. We have coins from them, a lot of coins. So that's why they're very strong. And that's why I personally would go for Bukharak and then leave Khwarezm for later and move down south to fight the Seleucids. But in any case, basically at the beginning, you have a strong army, go take Bukharak, and then move against the Seleucids. So Asak is a pretty good town. Zadrakarta is another good town that's close by, a pretty good economic town. But let's talk a little bit about faction progression here. So basically, the Parthian reforms are not as... I'm going to toggle the fog of war here. Spoiler alert. Just because I want to show how to do the reforms here. But in any case, you're surrounded by rebels and then the Seleucids. So you don't actually have a border with Bactria at the start. Now, in order to get the first tier of the reforms, so at the beginning, if you look at your culture here, you're actually a steppe nomad. So you have steppe nomad culture rather than Eastern tribal or Eastern Imperial culture. So what you want to do at the start is move towards settling Nisaya, move towards making it a town rather than a camp. So what you'll want to do is upgrade the farms, and then eventually you'll have to dismantle the Court of the Warlord building here, because you cannot convert a camp if you have herds, because they don't allow you to if you have herds, then it doesn't allow you to build up the farms to the necessary level you need to have them at in order to convert the settlement. But that's one thing I would move towards. Another thing is so that you can make Nisaya a nice royal capital. But the other thing is that for the first part of the reforms, Parthian reforms are simpler than the reforms for Saka, and actually I would say they're comparable to the Bactrian reforms. What you have to do is you have to take Asak, Hekatompilos, Ekbatana, and Raga. And I believe Raga is called Europos, according to the Seleucids, and or Apamea. I forget which one. But you have to take those cities, and you have to upgrade their farms to rank 4. So if you look in the building browser, you have to get them to rank 4 farms, so the large-scale farms. And once you get large-scale farms in those cities, then boom, Parthia settles, and it becomes Eastern Imperial. So you don't even go to Eastern Tribal. You go to Eastern Imperial. Now, once you get to Eastern Imperial, then that really allows you to upgrade your settled cities more. It gives you better government buildings, right? So you'll be able to construct satrapies, allied satrapies, royal satrapies, governments like that, which are very good for the settled towns that are next to you in Nisaya. So you're kind of like a camp in the middle of a bunch of settled territories, which is also interesting. But additionally, yeah, so that's essentially the main part of the Parthian reforms. And then once you do that, you can basically, if you want to go for historical expansion, then you should take Margiana, Area, Drangiana, Zarangai over here, Gedrosia, Carmania, Persepolis, all these Seleucid cities until Mesopotamia. Because, of course, you'll take Seleucia and Babylon, and Mesopotamia, of course, became kind of the heart of the Persian empires, starting from the Parthian period to the Sassanid period. And they founded their capital, Ctesiphon, right near Seleucia, over here. So, yeah, that's going to be your main avenue of expansion, south, southwest, and southeast. And then eventually, of course, the east. Because Bactria is very rich, so you'll want to take that at some point. But actually in EB2, the Parthians get... and the other thing is that'll give you access to a lot better infantry. So at the beginning here, you'll see your best infantry is probably the Nizagdar here, the regular Iranian spearmen. They're not bad. They're pretty comparable to units like the Armenian spearmen. They're better than the Cappadocian spearmen, and they're better than the Kardakan, the basic, what's it called, the Persian heavy spearmen, I think. They're not bad, and they have bonus against cavalry. You just can't recruit that many of them at the beginning of the campaign. But you also get this unit, the East Iranian archer spearmen, which is a very good unit, because even though they're not as good archers as the Parthian foot archers, they're much better in melee, and they have spears, so they can kind of hold their own against cavalry for a few seconds, at least longer than the Parthian foot archers, which are also good They're very good. They're very cheap. They're not as cheap as like the Saka foot archers, which are pretty comparable to them. But they're pretty cheap, all things considered. And of course, you can recruit and retrain your cataphracts at the capital as well from the start. But additionally, in EB2, unlike in EB1, the Parthians get access to a second tier of the reforms. So let's say you don't decide to go southwest, or you do, and now you want to secure your eastern border. So you can move east, and once you take the Indian territories, so Taxila, Paropamisade, Opiana here, and Patala, and Girnar, if you take these territories, or at least one of them, let's say Patala, then what you have to do in order to get the Indo-Parthian reform, so you get an Indo-Parthian reform here, is you have to move, so you'll see the Parthians, they have different clan ties. So you see Arshak is House Arsakid, so he's an Arsakid. The current king here is Daha, so he's from the Daha clan. And you have other noblemen as well, so this guy is also Arsakid. But as you expand, you'll get access to more clans, and one of those clans is the Suren. And you will want to put a Suren governor into whatever Indian province you have, let's say Patala. And once you have a Suren governor in Patala, then that will trigger the Indo-Parthian reform, which will let you build a special Indo-Parthian Kingdom government building in your Indian provinces, which will allow you to recruit nice Indian units, including Indian elephants, I believe. And that's a very nice perk that the Parthians get here. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say about the Parthians. Their campaign, I'd say it's not so difficult. It's not as tough as it is in EB1, because at the beginning your economy is not that bad, and that's because you have these very nice silver mines at the start. And actually, once you take Bukharak, your economy's in pretty decent shape, all things considered. And the Seleucids, unlike playing as Hayastan or something, the main Seleucid forces are not here. The main Seleucid forces are in the Middle East. Or they're in Mesopotamia and Syria. So that actually buys you a lot of time to kind of take and consolidate these cities up here. And once you get some of them, you're in a real good position against the Seleucids. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say about the Parthians. It's definitely... they're not easy. They're challenging if you don't know what you're doing. But I hope that my little guide here helps you out, and especially the part about the Indo-Parthian reform. So don't think it's over once you just become imperial, because it's not. Because then you have to go conquer the East and get your nice Indo-Parthian reform so that you can scare your Western enemies and invade Greece with an Indo-Parthian army complete with heavy elephants. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Parthia. So yeah, let me know what faction you'd like to see for the next guide. I know some people want to see the Getae and the Romans. So I'll see what I can do. I'll see you guys in the next video.